if you grew up in the 90s, chances are you might have watched a show called North of 60. And it's a fantastic show. It's one I watched in the early 2000s in reruns, and I'm watching again because I put out an episode on January 31st all about the history of this show. Now, I talked to Tom Jackson about his role on the show as Peter Kenidi, and it was a wonderful interview. This is actually the second time that I've talked to Tom about, his life, his career, and things like that, and I always come away feeling fantastic because he's such a nice man to talk to. He's just a kind person. I always feel good after talking to him. So enough about me and how awesome Tom Jackson is. Let's just get straight to the interview. Kind of how did you get the, obviously you were on, I think it was Spirit Bay beforehand, and you were kind of getting known across Canada with your music, but how did you get the part on North of 60 back in 92?
I was shooting another film called Medicine River, and I was in Calgary and staying at the International Hotel and was downstairs having breakfast with my friend Graham Greene, who you would know.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a number of people across the way that were looking over, and a couple of gentlemen got up. They were wearing suits, and they started walking across the restaurant. And I said to Graham, I said, "You know those guys?" And so I figured that they were coming to talk to Graham, maybe. And we weren't quite sure, but being who we were, we decided we better stand up. So we stood up, and one of the gentlemen said, my name is Wayne Grigsby, and we're thinking of shooting a series out here, and I think we probably have a part in it for you if you're interested. And I really thought they were talking to Graham. And I said, sure. And we shook hands. He said, okay, well, we'll be in touch. And they left. And I went upstairs after breakfast and was talking to my wife, Allison. And I said, Allison, there was a guy downstairs making fun of Wayne Gretzky. He said, so months later, I get a call to go to a meeting, and I happened to be in Toronto. I was working on another show called Shining Time Station, and that was also a series,
Mm-hmm.
the children's series. So I got called to this meeting, and it's a little bit fuzzy because it was quite a long time ago, but the end result of the meeting was that they had offered me a role in North of 60. And I said, no, thanks. I said, that's not the kind of role that I would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if in fact you made Peter, that was the character, and it was Michelle's younger brother in the original script. I said, if you made Peter her older brother, I'd be interested in that role. Mm-hmm. If you're interested. And ultimately, that's what they were very kind to me, and offered me the role of Peter, and rewrote the character to be Michelle's older brother. And that's how we got started.
So you kind of seem to have a bit of input into Peter. Was that something that continued on through the show, not only having input in the character, but input on, the direction of the show, some of the storylines and things like that?
Let me answer the first question. I didn't really have that much input into who Peter was. I had at one point just a little teeny little influence about who Peter wasn't. Mm-hmm. So I knew who Peter was. And in one episode, I think it was in the second season, Peter supposedly cheated on his wife. Never saw it. Mm-hmm. But that was the rumor in the story. And I was walking through an airport, and it wasn't just once, but it was a couple of times, somebody said to me, so you cheated on your wife, you asshole. Really, and I was literally, that's what they said to me in the airport. So I went to my friend Tom Dencox, who was a producer. I said, Tom, can you do me a favor? He said, and don't have Peter cheat on his wife again. I said, because it's not what I do. That's not who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And because of a lot of the things that I do, that saying that life imitates art and vice versa, in a lot of ways is true. So I have to be very conscious of what I want to do in life
Mm-hmm.
versus what I want to do on the screen. They kind of have to be close some way, or I'm not really excited about going those other directions.
Now the show broke a lot of ground.
Did that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely, it did. Yeah, without a doubt.
Okay. Right. I know I said, okay, I'll answer the first part.
No, that absolutely did.
Okay.
The show broke a lot of ground, obviously, when it came to Indigenous representation on television. When you first started with it, did you see it as something that would kind of not only inspire maybe shows down the road like we have now, but kind of that it was breaking new ground with the fact it was set in the Canadian North, it had a lot of Indigenous actors, it had Indigenous consultants and things like that?
I didn't have that kind of insight. Not meaning to say I didn't observe that,
Mm-hmm.
because it did become a part of Canadian culture, and that became a part of what our learning was too, because the series gave an opportunity, unlike any other time that I can imagine or remember, a window into First Nation communities and life in First Nation communities. And again, because of what you said, acknowledge that there were consultants from the North that were part of the research and subsequent the writing of the show. And it was really very rewarding to be part of that. And maybe if one wants to expand their ego, think that they actually had something to do in the creation of it. I really was quite aware of what the spin-off of that was relative to me in my life and watching others. And then subsequent to that, to not necessarily see immediate spin-offs,
Mm-hmm.
but to see other things that took place, maybe in tandem, maybe in coincidence, maybe driven by this. But there is this little known station called APTN, right? And regardless of whether it was north of 60 or something else, APTN brought something that unique to the world. It was an Aboriginal people's television station, and as far as I know, I don't know if it's been mirrored someplace else or not, but I know it's very unique, and it's got a lot of eyes, a lot of lenses looking at APTN and what they do. Mm-hmm. And those questions that you're asking me, I think I have to rethink, because I'd be asking APTN the same question, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how did we come to this point? We're now not just being driven by something, but actually driving something.
Mm-hmm. In my research, I found an interview where Tina Keeper said that, with the exception of yourself and Gordon Tutusis and some others, a lot of the actors were very new to acting when they got their parts. I think for Dakota House, it was like his first role ever. Did that kind of like lend a bit to the, I guess, how did that influence the show with all these people who were very new to acting coming in and creating these characters?
I think it influenced the show more than it influenced the characters, in that people were involved in the show, and in some cases just because that's who they were in real life. So they were bringing their own characters and their own essence to this mixture that created a show that was truly honest. And again, not to be redundant, or rather to be redundant, realizing that the brilliance of Wayne Grigsby, Barb Samuels, Tom Dencox, and others to look into real stories and to research real stories, and then bring that to the writing team and have First Nation people on that writing team, and have it continue to be from an honest place. I think that's really what resonated with Canadian audiences, and still does today. There's a lot of people who still watch this show faithfully. They go looking for it, and I run into them all the time. And we haven't shot a frame of an episodic since 1997. With all due respect, you might not have been born then.
Oh no, I would have been 17 then. So
Oh, there you go.
I watched reruns of North of 60 in the early 2000s and enjoyed it. And then I actually last night bought the entire series because I was writing so much about it, and I remember how much I enjoyed it. So I'm like, I'm going to rewatch the show because it was a really good show. Kind of in relation to that, is it nice to see the show has had legs for so long? I mean, it's been 30 years since it, or over 30 years since it debuted, a quarter century since the series itself ended. Is it nice to see that, people still enjoy the series, still watch it on things like APTN or stream it?
The obvious answer is yes, but the not so obvious piece of that is the kind of resonance that it had still brings joy, and it not only brings joy with you sitting in your living room when you're watching, but when I get to interact with people who have just had that experience just recently, or even just bring it into their minds, to actually interact in real life with people who enjoyed and were experiencing the joy of watching North of 60. Now it's just me and them. It's like me and you. It's like this is real life, me and you. And that's the kind of thing that happens, just on a regular basis in my life.
I've seen a lot of people mention that they'd like to see it come back. Would that be something that you'd want to do? Is whether it was a TV movie or a relaunch of the series? Would you like to see it come back? Is the time right for it to come back to tackle new storylines and new issues that have popped up? For the Indigenous people in Canada.
There is, or was, discussions going on, and I was briefly in part included in those conversations as to whether, if it happened, would I, because it would require, I think, that kind of participation from the other characters, Michelle included, and maybe Dakota and others, in that conversation to legitimize the reoccurrence, resurrection, if you will, of the show. I think we all agreed that we would, but those decisions ultimately are not at. We don't have the opportunity to make those things happen. That falls into the category of the broadcasters and the funders and all those other things.
Looking back on the show, obviously, other than things like, say, the computers, the hair, and some of the fashion, the show has aged very well. And do you feel like it's because the issues that were being tackled in the 1990s are still issues that need to be tackled today, and that's helping it find new fans?
Yeah, and there are other examples. The issues that are part of life in northern communities haven't changed a lot. There are other models of series that are out there that continue to echo a lot of that, Tribal and Blackstone and a number of others who have done fabulous jobs in what they do it and bring it to a more modern time. And the issues don't change that much. Not that I've seen. I'm not saying that that's a good or bad thing. I just know that they still exist, and I think that there's still a need for the world to look through that window that North of 60 created.
Obviously, the show had kind of a very large impact on your life, but is there anything that stands out from your time on the show? Any particular memory that stands out from your time on the original show rather than or even the TV movies, I guess?
I've had, there's a lot of great memories for me, and maybe some not so much. We lost one of our cast members to suicide, but that wasn't part of the show that was something in real life, and we lost a couple of characters, crossed over to the spirit world. But in real life, uh, some of the mm, some of the things that happen in real life, people look for leadership, and they look for people that are likely to help them create health for themselves. And even now today, we talk a lot about COVID and mental health and all those things that is the stress is consistent. The source of stress may not be the same, but stress is consistent. And when we were experiencing the effect of losing one of our cast members to suicide, somebody said, well, how do we get out of this funk? Right. And part of that, I'm thankful that it was directed towards my shoulders, and I was able to find others that knew a lot more than me. And there's a lot of that in the world. So I went and got some coaching as to how do we help our community get through this. And what I realized, that the spin-off of that and the answer to your question, is that we don't want to have to get through figuring out how to deal with somebody who's we've lost to the spirit world. We don't want to have to get that. Okay, it's a piece of life. But how about we try and prevent that? What if we try and heal our communities, and bring them to a place where we potentially with what might happen, and we bring health and happiness and joy and compassion and empathy and hope and faith. And we bring those things to our community, and we show leadership in doing that. If there's an impact from something memorable north of 60, for me, that's probably the thing that lives in me today, is that ongoing effort to create health in our communities. In your community, it's not just our communities. In the community, I mean, just imagine this: if you can figure out that you don't have to teach your child kindness, you only need to be kind. And if that happens, your family's going to see it, and they're going to like it. And then your community is going to see it, and they're going to like it. And then maybe the nation will see it, and maybe they'll like it. What if that happens? Just what if, right? So the seed of all of that really comes from a better understanding for ourselves what joy and all those other things, that joy, compassion, health, and those things. What does that mean? How can we be our own hospital? How do we heal ourselves versus managing disease?
Absolutely. Perfect. Well, that was all my questions.
Well, you're awesome.
Yeah, no, again, like I said, I started writing this, and I just realized how much I enjoyed the series back in the early 2000s when I watched the reruns. So back watching it now, and yeah, like I said, it really holds up, other than like obviously fashions and hair and everything, but which is very, very noticeable.
Yeah. Let me ask you to do me a favor.
Sure.
Okay. So close your eyes for a second.
Okay.
Now think of 3 things that tickle your soul. And now listen to my voice. I love you. Can open your eyes. Now, I defy the thought that you don't feel just a little bit better than you did 30 seconds ago.
Without a doubt, I do.
So when we disconnect, do me a favor. Pick up your phone, call somebody, tell them you love them, and ask them to do the same.
I will.
That's what North of 60 did for me.